NASCAR plans to review the championship format and is open to changes. Joey Logano says that NASCAR threatened to suspend drivers for the Daytona 500 if they manipulated the Phoenix Championship finale. Roger Penske buys the Long Beach Grand Prix. Does that open the door for NASCAR? And Denny Hamlin, he goes at Larry McReynolds on Twitter. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. The NASCAR offseason typically isn't this eventful. Like, after Phoenix ends, you get like a week's worth of news and then everything kind of quiets down. And I just don't think that's going to happen this year. You'll get some driver announcements and everything like that, but we've got the lawsuit going on. We've got a bunch of Xfinity and truck stuff that is still open and still needs to be confirmed. We have Roger Penske buying Long Beach. Let's get into what we want to talk about today. We'll start off with NASCAR being open to changing the championship format. So the Sports Business Journal and Adam Stern posted an article the other day where they mentioned that NASCAR had already planned to review the championship format before what happened at Phoenix. And what happened at Phoenix actually wasn't bad. Joey Logano won the championship by playing to the strengths of the format, but NASCAR had planned to review the championship format and they're open to tweaks. But according to Sports Business Journal, anything that happens for 2025 will likely be a minor tweak, if anything. A complete overhaul or big changes would likely have to wait until 2026, which makes a lot of sense. Sports Business Journal, though, also talked to some team executives who had some ideas, and among them, they questioned whether or not a driver should be locked into the playoffs based off of winning a regular season race, which I think is an interesting topic to broach. Then you have the other suggestion that potentially maybe the regular season champion should be locked into later rounds, like get a first round bye, kind of like what we see in, NBA, NFL, MLB playoffs, something like that. And then the topic of a championship round of 3 races rather than just a championship race was brought up. I think that's a good idea. If we talk about sort of what their ideas are, not locking a driver in the regular season to the playoffs. On paper, I like that idea because I think that some people don't deserve to be in the playoffs. We saw that happen this year. You didn't get your 16 strongest drivers into the playoffs. However, NASCAR wants to reward winning. NASCAR wants to put an emphasis on winning, and winning multiple races in the regular season should set you up better for the playoffs. Now, obviously, Joey Logano kind of exploited that system this year. Then we have the topic of whether or not the regular season champion should get a bye into a later round. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that. I understand it, but I don't love it. Yeah, it does put a lot of incentive on winning that regular season championship. At the same time, though, does that deserve to be passed on, over the first round? Because typically they should survive the first round anyways. So I think that one is kind of up in the air. The idea of a championship round, a 3-race championship round, huge fan of that idea. I don't like the winner take all 1-race playoff format. Yeah, I understand it. Like, it should create a great moment. Unfortunately, I don't think we've ever gotten any of those really great moments. And I think that the idea of a 3-race round, 1 is more intriguing, 2 is more marketable, 3 creates storylines and should produce, a better product, in my opinion, for that. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I am happy that NASCAR is at least receptive to potential changes. Steve O'Donnell talked about it last weekend in Phoenix. Elton Sawyer, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition, talked about it on SiriusXM this week. And they seem receptive to potential changes, which I think is a good thing. I know people want to rag on them all the time, but I think that the current regime is willing to sit back and be like, okay, things need to change here. If they need to change, they're willing to make those changes. Now we'll have to kind of see what those are, if there are any for 2025, and what could possibly happen for 2026. Joey Logano was on Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast this week talking about his championship win, and Kevin Harvick brought up the topic of penalties and said, we're going to get political here for a second, and Joey's eyes were like, what? He's looking over at his PR person like, we are not talking politics right now. Like, I'm 100% on board with Joey. Kevin kind of worded that weirdly and wanted to talk about taking politics in terms of, the inner sport workings there. Joey Logano, though, said something interesting that I haven't heard anybody else say up to this point. He said that NASCAR threatened drivers with a Daytona 500 suspension for next year if they manipulated Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series championship race in Phoenix. And I think that's a good thing. NASCAR absolutely needs to put their foot down when it comes to race manipulation. We saw Dale Jarrett absolutely rip them on the pre-race show on Sunday. They need to do something. They need to do something dramatic, and they need to send that message. And I think that they do. Nobody wants to get suspended for the Daytona 500. 1, it's the biggest race of the year. 2, it pays the most out of any other race this season. 3, I'm not sure if they're going to give you a waiver because you miss one of those races. Obviously, you have to start all, 36 races to be championship eligible. I'm not sure if they're going to give you a waiver for that. So it could have much bigger implications than just a Daytona 500 suspension. At the end of the day, they absolutely needed to do it. And I have no problem with it. I see some people being like, whatever happened to boys have at it? There's a difference between boys have at it and straight up race manipulation. And Logano talked about sort of the Chevy camp and what they were doing at Phoenix as well, saying that, yeah, they're smart enough now to not say things on the radio. But he said during practice, the one car, he said, chopped the nose off the 12 car, absolutely raced the dog crap out of him, which is different than Jeb Burton's dog food, if you remember that callback. And then he said that the 77 backed up a full straightaway to him just to put him in dirty airs to ruin his run. So he said they were still out there trying different things, but they weren't saying it over the radio. And he said it's a lot harder to prove at that point. But I'm happy that NASCAR is threatening to suspend drivers. Now, when it comes to the driver aspect of this, I know a lot of these drivers are at the mercy of what the teams are telling them. They're going to do what the people who sign their paychecks say. I 100% understand that, 1,000%. But NASCAR has to do something like this to protect the integrity of the sport and the sanctity of this championship if you're going to continue to have this elimination format. So I have zero problem with them doing this. Now, if it does happen again, if race manipulation happens, they need to follow through and suspend these drivers and hit teams with a very big fine, hit manufacturers with a big fine, which of course Steve O'Donnell said they will have the ability to do in 2025. On Wednesday evening, we heard that Roger Penske was in conversations to buy the Long Beach Grand Prix from Jerry Forsythe. Now we woke up on Thursday to the confirmation that Roger Penske and Penske Entertainment are now the owners of the Long Beach Grand Prix, something that they had attempted to purchase last year when Kevin Calcoven's estate put up his share of the race for sale. Ultimately, Jerry Forsythe bought that to keep it an IndyCar race. Now Roger Penske owns it, and he now has control of the two biggest races on the IndyCar calendar, the Indianapolis 500 as well as the Long Beach Grand Prix. I am curious though, does this open the door for NASCAR to potentially race on the streets of Long Beach in a joint weekend with IndyCar, or could we even see them have NASCAR the first weekend, IndyCar the second weekend, something to go along that those lines? Jerry Forsythe was very, very adamant that he wanted this race to remain an IndyCar race. That's why he purchased it. He did not want it to go to Formula One, did not want it to go to NASCAR. And remember, NASCAR last year explored the possibility of purchasing that 50% share from Kevin Calcoven's family. Ultimately, they didn't do that. Jerry bought it, so that was the end of the story there. But Roger Penske's a businessman. Roger Penske understands the financials of this. And the Long Beach Grand Prix, I don't know what their financials are, of course. But putting on a street race is expensive. NASCAR has talked about that openly. IndyCar knows that it's going to be expensive. They do it in Detroit. They're going to do it down in Arlington. And it's going to cost you $30-ish million, $40-ish million to do something like this. It's a big expense. So when you do that, for IndyCar, yeah, it is their second biggest race of the year. Yeah, they do pack a ton of people in for the Long Beach Grand Prix, or the Grand Prix of Long Beach, whatever the wording of it is. But Roger, like I said, is a businessman, and he looks at NASCAR. He looks at NASCAR's media rights deal. He looks at how much each track gets as part of that media rights deal, and he knows NASCAR wants to be in Southern California. This could be a perfect opportunity for NASCAR to get a street race on the West Coast and also not have to be responsible for any of the costs. NASCAR, of course, covers the cost of the NASCAR street race in Chicago. Here, they're just a participant. Roger Penske and Penske Entertainment own this event. They're, in charge of setup. They're in charge of everything that happens with the event. It is not NASCAR's event. So NASCAR can just kind of show up, race, and bounce out at the end of the day. I'm not sure if it's something that Penske Entertainment, IndyCar is interested in doing, because ultimately NASCAR will overshadow IndyCar in the Grand Prix of Long Beach. Like, it just will. NASCAR sells a lot of tickets. NASCAR's loud. It's boisterous. It has a bigger TV presence. It's going to be the bigger event. And yeah, if you do run them on the same weekend, kick, IMSA out of the Saturday race, put NASCAR on Saturday, IndyCar on Sunday. NASCAR never plays the undercard, but this would be an instance where the undercard is probably going to overshadow the main event, which happens on Sunday. I'm not 100% sure if the city of Long Beach would go for it, if Roger's even interested in it, but I think it's a potential avenue for NASCAR to do it. But if NASCAR wants to have complete control over this, they, of course, are apparently interested in San Diego, a little bit further south in California, but I think that would be a great event as well. But obviously, there was some interest from the NASCAR side in Long Beach last year, maybe they have their in for the future if they want it, if Roger is interested. So on Denny Hamlin's podcast, Actions Detrimental, this week, he and Steve Letarte kind of concocted what Denny's plan for a perfect playoff would be, or at least his preferred playoff format would be. It would be to double the regular season points. Then you take your top 16 drivers, you have 7 races. At the end of that 7 races, you take your top 4 drivers, reset the points to 0, and you have a 3-race championship round, winner take all at the end of it. Whoever has the most points at the end wins. Pretty reasonable approach. Denny did talk about, potentially Steve just having winners from the regular season be in the playoffs. I don't love that idea. I kind of like the idea of just taking the top 16 drivers in points, whoever they are, having those 7 races, and then having a 3-race championship round is pretty intriguing, all things considered. But Larry McReynolds is not happy at all. He is the NASCAR pit bull in this situation, and he came out and he was firing on Twitter. He is not happy that Denny's potential idea could allow a driver to not win a race at all and still be crowned champion, except he completely ignored the fact that Matt Crafton did just that in the Truck Series in 2019 and won the championship without winning a race in the elimination style format, completely exploited it. Remember, Ryan Newman came 1 position shy of doing just that back in 2014, the first season of this championship format. But Larry was not happy. Larry put out a tweet, and I think he was just angry tweeting because it doesn't really make a ton of sense. I'm going to read it to you exactly how it says, and it's confusing. Larry says, quote, "So just what we need again. Our champion could go through the entire 10-race playoff, not win a race, might not need to, and at the final race, back possibly to where for one driver headed into the race, a clinch scenario. Now this would be nail-biting and exciting. #unbelievable. We might not need to, and at the final race, back possibly to where for one driver headed into the race."
2 hours later.
Yeah, I've read it 4 times. It makes absolutely 0 sense. So Larry, English, please, one time for me. So Denny does not care for Larry McReynolds. He does not care for him, especially after the black helicopter conversation that Larry had a few weeks ago. I'm going to read you what Denny said in response. Denny says, "Hey, Larry, I know facts are hard to comprehend, but we actually had a champion crowned in trucks by a driver who didn't win at all during the regular season under this format. #believe it. Sorry, so what were you saying again about winning?" He then responds to that, "Oh, and if you could stop spreading disinformation to your listeners about our lawsuit, I would really appreciate it. Thanks." Yeah, Denny and Larry Mack do not see eye to eye. Larry is not a fan of 2311 Racing, does not think they've been around long enough to file a lawsuit against NASCAR and to question how NASCAR does anything. You guys can pick your own side on that. I'm not picking a side in this whole lawsuit conversation here. But for Denny, I think his playoff format is logical. For Larry, he's just an angry old man on the internet at this point who needs to proofread things and maybe just sit back and relax for a little bit, because there's definitely flaws in the playoff format. I think NASCAR even semi-acknowledged that, but I don't know. He's just angry on the internet. So let me know in the comments what you think about NASCAR possibly being open to changes for the playoff format. Joey Logano saying that NASCAR threatened to suspend drivers for the Daytona 500 if they manipulated the race at Phoenix. Roger Penske buying the Long Beach Grand Prix. Does that open the door for NASCAR? And Larry McReynolds' comments on Denny Hamlin's playoff idea. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok @BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @BreakHardBall.